Let's talk about variables. So, a variable is information or a characteristic collected in a study. Now, when it comes to variables, there are two main types. You have qualitative variables, and then you have quantitative variables. Right? So qualitative variables are things that are expressed using words or phrases. So, for example, you can think of variables like race, right, gender, blood type, and so on and so forth. Quantitative variables are things that are expressed using numbers. Now, there are two subtypes of quantitative variables. We have discrete quantitative variables, and then we have continuous quantitative variables. Discrete quantitative variables are variables that can only take on a finite number of values. Okay. Now this is a very broad definition of discrete quantitative variables. For the purpose of this course, you can think of discrete quantitative variables as variables that can be expressed using whole numbers. So, as an example, you may have, the number of courses that you take this semester. You may have the number of students in a classroom, and so on and so forth, right? So these variables take on values like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth, and they're all whole numbers. So continuous quantitative variables are then variables that can take on any value in a certain range, right? Or for the purpose of this course, these are variables that can be expressed using decimal numbers. So for example, you have things like weight, right, height, income, temperature, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now the last two things that we want to define are population and sample. Okay. So a population is the set of all entities in a study. And a sample is a subset of the population. I have given you an example of this in the first video, but let me go over that again. Right? Suppose that I want to know the average height of everybody on Earth. Right? Okay. So in that study, my population consists of roughly 7 billion people living on Earth. Okay, so people in the United States, people in Canada, people in the UK, people in South Africa, China, Brazil, everywhere, right? Of course, we can't possibly measure the heights of all 7 billion people. And so the idea is we want to take samples, right? So a sample is a subset of the population so one particular sample can be all students at West Georgia. Right? Okay. Suppose I think that I can use the information, the heights of everybody at West Georgia, to estimate the average height of everybody on Earth. Then I can choose my sample to be all students at West Georgia. Right. There will be other samples that other people can choose, so the number of samples can be potentially very large. Okay.